Hi, I'm Stuart. Welcome to my channel. Thanks for viewing my video. In this video, I'm going to talk about my music experiences in the 1980s. This is the second video in the series I'm doing. I previously published the video about my experiences in the 70s. I'm actually going to do two videos about my music experiences in the 1980s. The first is going to be about the more pop-oriented bands and concerts I went to. And the second is going to be about the heavy music I listened to. Mostly heavy metal bands, but I want to use the term heavy music because some bands that are kind of not too far away from heavy metal, like Aerosmith and Guns N' Roses, bands like that, I'm going to include as heavy music. If I was going to maybe talk about Led Zeppelin, I consider them heavy music too. So that's going to be the next video, but this one's going to be about the pop-oriented music and concerts. I got the idea for doing this video series in a little conversation that I had with Kelly at Books I'm Not Reading in the comment section to one of her videos when we both learned that we like Tori Amos. And I just thought it might be an interesting idea to talk about my experiences over the years because I've listened to a lot of music and have been to a lot of concerts. These music videos are in addition to my book videos. I'm still going to do the same book videos that I've done. Typically a reading wrap-up that I post on Sundays and a tag video that I post on Wednesdays. Kind of hope I was going to be able to release these music videos weekly on Fridays, but I missed Friday, August 16th. I hope I'll be able to release it in the coming week. First thing I want to talk about the top tier of bands and albums that I listened to in the 80s. In 1980, The River by Bruce Springsteen came out. This is a double album that I liked and listened to a lot. I know a lot of Springsteen fans would pick Born to Run or Born in the USA as their favorite albums from him, or perhaps Darkness on the Edge of Town, but The River was my favorite. A lot of great songs from the title song on, ballads, rockers, the great lyrics Springsteen's always had in his albums. It's just a great album, and my favorite Springsteen album, and I just could still listen to it today and I would get the same feelings about it, I think. In 1982, I got cable for the first time, and as part of the cable package, they provided MTV. MTV had started in 1981. They had 6 what they call VJs, video jockeys. Besides commercials, their time was totally filled with videos or the VJs talking about music. There's a lot of space to fill. So that gave an opportunity for bands and singers that maybe didn't get exposure otherwise to get some exposure. There's a few artists that became my favorites that I saw for the first time on MTV. One of them was Prince and the Revolution. First 2 songs I saw were Little Red Corvette in 1999. I can't remember which was the first, but those were the first 2 songs. And I soon thereafter purchased the 1999 album. It was kind of unique at the time because there was both men and women in his band, and there was also black and white members. That just wasn't done back then. Probably isn't done all that much even now, I suppose, but it's much more common. Another band that became a favorite of mine was Duran Duran. They just had some great videos. Videos of songs like Rio, Hungry Like the Wolf, The Reflex, Save a Prayer, and more. Rio was my favorite, and I got the Rio album, got some more of their albums. They were a bunch of great-looking guys, and they went to exotic places all over the world and filmed some great videos. Back then, they had really high budgets for doing videos, and I just love their videos. I think if they came out now, they might be called a boy band, but I don't recall that term being used then. I don't actually know when it came in vogue. Another band that I was introduced to by MTV was U2. Possibly Sunday Bloody Sunday was the first video of theirs I saw, but I can't remember for sure. But they were just a great band. I mean, they had great anthems, and I purchased a bunch of their albums. Became a big fan. I think the first album of theirs I got was War, and there's a few other names that just came to me when I was thinking about doing this video. Bands like Culture Club, I did have some of their albums. Wouldn't say they became a favorite, but I did have some of their albums. Flock of Seagulls, I think they just had one hit song, but Adam Ant, I had an album or two of his and I liked him. He was another very photogenic guy. Came across really good in the videos. Thompson Twins, Eurythmics, had some of both of their albums. Men Without Hats, I don't think I had anything from them, but they had a really popular song called The Safety Dance. The Buggles did a song, Video Killed the Radio Star, which was actually, I think, the first song that MTV ever played when they started in 1981. Cyndi Lauper. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There was a bunch of bands that I first saw on MTV. Way more than I can remember. And I just want to talk about some of what I call my top tier bands from that era. In 1983, REM released the Murmur album, and they had a great single from that, Radio Free Europe. Couldn't really understand the lyrics of lead singer Michael Stipe, but that album was really a great album. Went on to buy more albums from them, and the lyrics became decipherable. He sang in a manner you could understand, but that was my first exposure to REM. And in 1984, Prince and the Revolution released the album Purple Rain. There was some great singles off that album, the title track, When Doves Cry, Let's Get Crazy. It was a great album from start to end. Really, as they say now, no skips on that album. I hear those songs now, they can have the same effect on me, especially the intro to Let's Go Crazy or When Doves Cry. Just great songs. And they released a movie for it. It was actually the soundtrack to a movie by the same name, Purple Rain. That was a great music-based movie too. I played the Purple Rain album a ton. Prince was famous at that point. I mean, 1999 and his early work got him a good level of fame, but Purple Rain really shot him into the stratosphere. In 1984, Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band released Born in the USA. Great singles like Dancing in the Dark and the title track. Dancing in the Dark had a video where Springsteen pulled a very young Courtney Cox onto stage. A lot of great songs on that album from front to back. Born to Run made Springsteen a star, and then Darkness on the Edge of the Town and The River continued his rise, but Born in the USA made him huge. I mean, the album, the hit songs, just made him huge. This was another album I just played a lot. I just loved it. I mean, despite what I said about The River being my favorite, Born in the USA is another album I just could play now, and it would just have the same impact on me it had then. In 1982, Michael Jackson released the Thriller album. I forgot to mention in MTV, like the Thriller video that Michael Jackson had done it was a great video. They spent a ton of money on it, but it was a great video. I had heard of Michael Jackson before MTV, but Michael Jackson wasn't really a favorite of mine like Prince and Bruce Springsteen were, but just want to mention him and with them too, because like the three of them, Purple Rain, Born in the USA, and Thriller, they sold millions of albums. Like in current times, Taylor Swift moves a lot of vinyl and a lot of CDs, but nothing compared to what was done by those three in the early 80s. And the amazing thing is that they did it at the same time. It's just inconceivable, the numbers they were putting up with their album sales compared to what the music market has become. Just those three, they were just selling millions. In 1986, the Bangles released the album Different Light. The first I think I heard of him was the single Manic Monday, which was actually written by Prince and the pen name Christopher. And Walk Like an Egyptian was another big hit. They were just, I liked them from the beginning. They were a four-woman band, which was unusual at that time. They sang and played like kind of a sunny California sound. I just loved it. Played that album a lot. And in 1988, they released their next album, Everything. And from that album, Eternal Flame was a big hit, and there was other hits. That was another huge album for them. I just really love the Bangles. Though that's another group I could listen to now, and sometimes I do, and just really love their songs. Next, I want to talk about the second tier bands and singers and albums for me were just a little bit short of the first tier. It's possible, like maybe they did belong in the first tier, but maybe my memory is a little suspect. But these are groups and singers that I liked a lot too. So I suppose it doesn't really matter. In 1981, Joan Jett and the Blackhearts released the song I Love Rock and Roll. And that was just, from the beginning, just a very catchy song. Joan Jett was another unusual performer in the sense that she was a woman singing hard rock in the early 80s, and that just wasn't that done. She had a great attitude. But I say attitude like a rock and roll attitude, maybe a little bit of a punk attitude. I Love Rock and Roll was huge. It was a big hit. I got the album. I loved it. There was a lot of great songs on that album. Played it a lot. Got some more of her albums. I saw Amy Grant do the song Angels on the Grammys in 1984. She was quite young then. I really loved the song. It's possible it won a gospel Grammy, but I can't remember. I got the album. It was on Straight Ahead, and I really liked it. I got some more of her albums. I listened to her a lot in the 80s and into the 90s. She's actually one of the few Christian artists I became a big fan of. Just that introduction, I really liked her. There's some bands and singers too I'm going to talk about here. I maybe should have mentioned in my 70s video, and this is one of them. Heart. Heart's a band I started liking in the 70s. I heard songs like Crazy on You, Magic Man, Barracuda, fronted by two sisters, Ann and Nancy Wilson. Again, as I said, a few of these people, like women fronted her. It was unusual at that time. They were a rock band. I really liked them. I got more of their albums. Just some of those songs like, Barracuda. So there is a 1985 tie-in for them, though, because in 1985, they released their comeback album, which is called Heart. They had some great singles, What About Love, Dreams, and probably more. It was a great album and brought them back into the public consciousness. Another artist I started liking in the 70s, into the 80s, was Billy Joel. First I ever heard of Billy Joel is the song Piano Man, and it's still one of my favorites. That's just a great lyrical song that paints a picture in my mind of just a great song. What caused me to become a fan of his, though, was the album The Stranger. Had a lot of great singles. Moving On, Scenes from an Italian Restaurant, Only the Good Die Young, More Than That, I guess. Just a great album. I think that one was the one that really made Joel huge. He's another great lyricist. Maybe not in the Springsteen level, but Joel's a great lyricist. Songs like Piano Man, Scenes from an Italian Restaurant. They're just great lyrics in those songs. And great music, too. And I continued buying his albums into the 80s. Another one I should have mentioned in the 70s was Elton John. In my previous video about the 70s, I talked about songs that were on the radio in the early 70s when I started listening to music on an AM Top 40 station. One of the songs I didn't think of when I was doing that video, but I thought afterwards, was Benny and the Jets by Elton John. Elton John is kind of unique for me in that for most artists, like, albums are the preeminent thing. Just a couple singles isn't enough. But with Elton John, these singles are the main thing. He just had so many. Singles like Crocodile Rock, Saturday Night's Alright for Fighting, Candle in the Wind, Rocket Man, a whole bunch more. Just it says so. When I think of Elton John, I think more of the individual great songs he's had. There is one album though that really stands out for me, and that is Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. I think this is a great album, which is not to say his other albums aren't great albums. It's just that to me is like just a great album, start to finish. A lot of great songs on it. I think it's a double album, pretty sure. In the comments to my first video, Pat at Book Chat with Pat 8668 commented that seemed like she liked more softer rock artists and I like more hard rock artists, and that overall is probably true, but there's a couple artists she mentioned that show that we do have a good overlap. Actually, we both like Springsteen, so that's an overlap, but she mentioned Elton John, and I would have thought of Elton John anyway, but the other artist she mentioned, I'm kind of glad she did, because I don't know if I would have thought of him, and that artist was Dan Fogelberg. Back in the late 70s, probably, could have been the early 80s, a friend of mine introduced me to Dan Fogelberg. I think the first album of his I got was The Netherlands. Could have been Souvenirs. I'm not, but I think it was probably The Netherlands. But Dan Fogelberg was a singer-songwriter, kind of a sensitive lyrics. And I really liked him. I got a bunch of his albums. One of my favorite artists at that time. Funny thing is, I didn't think of him until Pat mentioned him, but I'm glad she did. Strangely, I don't think that I hear Dan Fogelberg played when I occasionally listen to a station that played the 70s, 80s, and 90s songs. I don't know why, because he was really quite popular at that time. But if he is getting played, then I'm missing it. Another band in my second tier is the B-52s. In 1989, they released the album Cosmic Thing. It had some great singles on it, Love Shack, Rome, and more. That was another great album from start to finish. I played that album a ton. I had heard of the B-52s before. They were kind of they had some good stuff, but what they were doing was really not mainstream. This album was a huge hit for them. Just another great album that I played. Sometimes I hear Rome when I'm at the local mall, and it still gets me going. Like 35 years later. Just some great songs on that album. Next I want to talk about some concerts I went to in the 80s. In 1980, a group of friends and I went to see Queen at the Hartford Civic Center in Hartford, Connecticut. I only remember a couple things about that concert. One is that despite Queen being at the height of its popularity, at least in the US, I think their popularity stayed stronger in Europe after that. Despite that, the Civic Center wasn't full. The other thing is that during Bohemian Rhapsody, during a complex part of it, the band members left the stage. And only in retrospect did I think that if that happened now, if there was some part of a song that a band couldn't play live, they would just pretend to play live and act like everything was normal. But it shows that the authenticity of a group like Queen, which maybe, I don't mean to like beat on bands now and stuff, but there is like admittedly a lot more lip syncing, a lot more recorded backing and stuff like that now. So it was just interesting that the authenticity of Queen. In 1980, my sister and I went to see Bad Company at the Springfield Civic Center in Springfield, Massachusetts. Bad Company is another band that I should have mentioned in my 1970s video. They're definitely a second tier band for me, a band I liked a lot, played a lot. I don't remember what first introduced me to them, but they had some great songs like Bad Company, Silver, Blue, and Gold, Moving On, Shooting Star, and a lot more great albums. I got maybe all their early albums into the early 80s. Don't really remember anything about the concert, just being happy to see him. In 1980, my sister and I went to see Pat Benatar at the Springfield Civic Center in Springfield, Mass. Pat Benatar is another artist I could have mentioned in my 1970s video, although it would have been at the end of it. I think the first I heard of her was in 1979, the single Heartbreaker. She had a lot of hits with the mid to late 80s. She's another artist, somewhat of a theme, I guess, that another woman who was a rocker, which was relatively rare then. I had all of her albums for that period. Don't really remember anything from the concert, just happy having seen her. And I saw her again at the Hartford Civic Center in 1986 with the Alarm opening. I'm not sure if I went with someone else, like a friend or my sister to that one. I may well have. In 1984, Bruce Springsteen put tickets on sale for his Born in the USA tour. I don't think I tried to get tickets. I just figured the concert was sold out. But not too long later, after that, I heard that there were tickets available behind the stage at both his Hartford Civic Center concerts. So I pretty quickly went up to the Hartford Civic Center, got 3 tickets, one for myself, one for my sister, one for our friend, including the break between sets. It was about a 4-hour concert. He was on stage a long time. And Springsteen was very energetic, great. The E Street Band is a great band. Don't really remember any details in particular about that concert. Just another one. Really happy to have seen. And especially not thinking that we'll be able to get tickets for it. In 1985, I went with my friend to see Prince and the Revolution at the Hartford Civic Center, the Purple Rain Tour. It was a really tough ticket to get. My friend and I, we weren't co-located, but we were close together. Just really happy I saw that concert. I've never been to like a legendary concert like, say, a Woodstock or, I don't know, Live Aid, or maybe like first concert at Coachella or something like that. Concerts are considered legendary, but I have seen some legendary tours, and certainly the Born in the USA tour of Springsteen and the Purple Rain tour of Prince. Those were legendary tours that I was really glad I was able to see both of them. I saw Prince again at the Hartford Civic Center in 1988. I don't think I liked that one as much. I think if I recall that one correctly, it was more almost like the whole thing was kind of like most of it was a medley, which I would prefer to hear whole songs than just most of a whole concert being a medley. In 1985, I went to see Amy Grant with my sister at the New Haven Coliseum. Russ Taff was the opener. We had 4th row seats. This concert was a turning point for me because it was so loud, being so close to the stage, that after this concert I looked into getting hearing protection, and I wore it going forward. I'm sure there was occasional times I forgot it, but most of the time I wore it, and although I probably do have some damage with all the concerts I went to, certainly it would have been way worse if I didn't start wearing hearing protection at that time. I mean, I don't have any tinnitus or anything like that, so that concert was a turning point for me. Another concert I just remember being happy to go to. It's hard to remember the details from so long ago. In 1985, I saw Roger Waters at the Hartford Civic Center. I talked in a previous video about Waters had an acrimonious split from Pink Floyd. In 1984, Waters released his first post-Floyd album, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. Pretty good album. It wasn't Pink Floyd, but it was a pretty good album. And he toured that album. This concert was an important milestone for me because it was the first one I went to by myself. A lot of times what I did then is I got a couple of tickets and I give a ticket to a friend and I say, you can have the ticket if you drive or something like that. But this concert I couldn't get somebody to go. so I went by myself. And that was important because, my friends were, getting on with their lives and drifting away from going to concerts. And there was one friend I was still going to concerts with, but, he last wanted to go in 1987, so it was really important that I was able to go by myself, especially considering some of the artists that I went to in future years, future decades that I'll talk about. I saw Waters again in 1988 on the Radio Chaos Tour. I can't remember on either of those stops if he played any Pink Floyd songs. Once the agreement was made about how they're going to divvy up the songs between he and the other members of Pink Floyd, he got the rights to the songs from The Wall, but the remaining members of the band got the remaining songs, so he wouldn't have been able to play anything beyond the songs from The Wall. Eric Clapton backed him on guitar at one of the shows. I think the first, but I'm not sure. That was the first time I saw him. On October 25, 1986, my sister and I saw Billy Joel at the New Haven Coliseum in New Haven, Connecticut. If you're a baseball fan from New England, New York area, that date would mean something to you. You have to be a little older too. But that was the date of the 6th game of the World Series. At the time I was a baseball fan, I'm not anymore, and that World Series was between the Red Sox and the Mets. So in this concert, Billy Joel and all his band members minus one wanted the Mets to win, and one wanted the Red Sox to win. Because the concert was in New Haven, the audience was divided, say half wanted the Red Sox, half wanted the Mets, and Billy Joel would announce the score. And if the Red Sox were ahead or did something good, the cheer from the Red Sox fans went up. If the Mets did something good, cheer from the Mets fans went up. So my sister and I, after the concert, it was another good concert. Like I said, I can't really remember the details, but certainly good seeing Billy Joel. We went back to the car. We're driving home. We put the game on the radio, and it looks like it's the 6th game. Looks like the Red Sox are going to win. They were up 3-2, so they would have won the World Series. Go in the house. Just as we get in the house was Bob Stanley threw a pitch that resulted in a hit. Ball went through Bill Buckner's legs. Mets won the game. They won the 7th game of the World Series. The Red Sox had not won a World Series since 1918, and their drought continued, so that was a memorable part of that night. Just being in an arena with, split fans and a band from New York City. Mostly, I don't know where the band members are from, but Joel from New York City. In 1985, my sister, our friend, and myself went to see Heart at the New Haven Coliseum. My main memory of that particular concert was that for some reason we couldn't park in the garage. My sister drove, and she had a little trouble finding a spot to leave her car. It was one of those inner city places where you have to leave your keys, and I think most of us, we're not used to that. We don't get real comfortable with that, but it didn't stop her from enjoying the concert. I saw Heart again, and I think perhaps with both of them, or at least one, either my friend or my sister, in 1986. So it was just good seeing Heart. In 1986, my friend and I saw U2, a couple of concerts at the Hartford Civic Center. I think there were 2 concerts a day off between them. At the time, U2 was rapidly rising, but they weren't quite what they became. But they were still big enough that they would do 2 shows in an arena. So it was another concert. It was great seeing them. I don't know if I knew then they were going to become legendary or not. I can't remember what I thought. But in 1987, a local amusement park opened an area of the park for big-time concerts. It was an outdoor place, not covered at all. Went to a few concerts there. One especially memorable is in 1988. I saw a triple bill with the Sugar Cubes, New Order, and Public Image Limited. I did have the Sugar Cubes album, so I think that was probably the reason I went to that concert. The Sugar Cubes now, if they're remembered at all, are probably remembered as being the band that Bjork was in before she went on to a very successful commercially and critically acclaimed career. I don't think I had anything from New Order before the concert, and I know I didn't have anything for Public Image Limited. Coming out of that concert, though, I did get a lot of music from New Order, a band I really grew to like. Another band that I like to this day. I sometimes play their music. Some of their songs really do it for me. Public Image Limited was the post-Sex Pistols band headed by Johnny Rotten. It was just a great triple bill to have seen. Very, very cool one to have seen. And as I said, New Order became a favorite of mine after that concert. I got a lot of Bjork albums too. In 1989, I saw the Bangles at Lake Compounce. It was just great seeing them live. I just remember that. As I said when I talked about them above, a 4-woman band. They were backed by a man on guitar and bass for the tour, but he was like a session musician type, wasn't a member of the band. Just a cool band to have seen live. In 1989, I saw the B-52s at Lake Compounce. Another band, just a cool one to see live. Just happy that I saw them at that time, at the height of their popularity. There was must have been a former warehouse in West Hartford that staged concerts for a while. Went through various names. Stage West, the West Hartford Agora, probably more that I can't remember. It had basically two rooms. There was a big room, hold several thousand, and a smaller one. I think they just walled it off, the smaller one. And maybe, I don't know, 500, 1,000, the smaller one. I saw Joan Jett and the Blackhearts a couple times there. And I later saw Joan Jett and the Blackhearts at Lake Compounce. Just another person I was really happy to see. Now I'm just going to talk about some other concerts. I don't remember all the concerts I went to them, but in doing some decluttering that I've been doing over the recent year or two, I did come across some documents, some records that reminded me of some other concerts I went to. Probably won't say too much about these, but I saw Jethro Tull in 1981 and 1987 at the New Haven Coliseum. I saw Styx in the early 80s at the New Haven Coliseum. I saw the Police with R.E.M. opening in 2003 with my sister at the Hartford Civic Center. That was another cool one to see. A friend of mine had tickets, he couldn't go, so we bought the tickets off of him. That was them supporting their Synchronicity album, and not long after that they broke up. So that was a very cool one to see. I did have a lot of Police albums. They weren't quite as top tier as some other bands, but they were a band I liked a lot. And interestingly, R.E.M., they weren't happy with their performance there, so they did not play arenas for a while after that. I did see R.E.M. at the place I mentioned earlier, Stage West / Agora Ballroom. I saw them around 1986. I saw a legendary artist, Gordon Lightfoot, at the Oakdale Theater, mid-1980s. I saw Billy Ocean at the Oakdale Theater, mid-1980s. I saw Robert Plant at the Hartford Civic Center in 1988. I saw Joe Walsh at the Oakdale Theater in Wallingford, Connecticut with my sister in 1988. Took her for her birthday. I saw Lisa and Colchiam at the Oakdale Theater in 1988. I saw Steve Winwood at the Hartford Civic Center with my sister in 1988. that was a brief moment. Steve Winwood used to be in the band Traffic, but he had a brief, really big pop in his solo career at that time. I think the album was called Back in the High Life, and it was a huge hit. I saw Dan Fogelberg at the Hartford Civic Center in 1984. At the time, I was not in a very good mental state. I was quite depressed, so I didn't enjoy the concert. I wasn't enjoying anything at the time. This was actually the only concert I went to in that state, but it's unfortunate because it's the only time I saw Dan Fogelberg. I saw Tina Turner at the Hartford Civic Center in 1985 as part of the Private Dancer tour. Private Dancer came out in 1983. It was a huge album. Another huge album. I mentioned a few earlier, but there was a lot of big sellers in the earlier days, back in the 80s. And that was another big seller. So it was great seeing her. I saw Lionel Richie in 1986 or 1987 at the Hartford Civic Center. It wasn't a huge Lionel Richie song, but he had a fair amount of hits, a lot of catchy songs. So it was good to see him. I saw David Bowie in the 1980s as part of the Glass Spider tour. I don't remember what year, but it was in the 80s. I do remember there was this huge, kind of surrounding the stage, this giant spider surrounding the stage, and he played his hits. There were a later tour I saw him. He didn't play his hits, but this tour he played his hits. I wasn't a huge Bowie fan. I wouldn't consider him maybe in the top 2 tiers like I talked about, but I did have a lot of his music, and he did have a lot of great songs. So it's always good to see something like that, and he's deservedly a legend. Next, I want to talk about the ticket buying process at the time. In the late 70s, when my friends and I would get concert tickets, we would just go to a local music store and get tickets there. As we wouldn't line up or anything like that, but as time went on into the early 80s, if I wanted to get a ticket or friends and I wanted to get a ticket, I would line up at a local site. It was frequently at that time I don't know if it was Ticketmaster. I think whatever it was became Ticketmaster, but there were locations at local Macy's, became Filene's at some point. I'm not sure when that transition was. But what you would do is you would try to get there early enough so that there wouldn't be that many people in front of you in line. And you just hope that you get good seats. You would frequently have someone, maybe a mother, trying to get tickets to her kid. She might be kind of dithering with the person who was selling the tickets, and you want to kind of scream, just take what you get, because while a person's dithering, tickets are being sold, and you might keep getting pushed back and back. There was never a time that I didn't get tickets when I did that. It was kind of a thrill doing it. You just didn't know what you're going to get, and you just lined up with a bunch of other fans. It was kind of cool. And I was never in a huge line. I think maybe I'd be 30th or something like that. Maybe 30 to 50, but there was never a huge line in front of me, so it was kind of cool doing it. Next, I want to talk about CDs, compact discs. I'm not really sure when CDs were released. I think it was the early 80s, but I believe it was 1984 when I got my first CD player. I think it was probably a Pioneer one. It wasn't a portable one like they have now. I don't even know if they had portable ones back then. They probably did. But it was a CD player that it would hook up to your stereo system. And at that time, a stereo system, you'd have a receiver. The CD player would plug into the receiver. And the receiver, you'd attach cables to the speakers. You have to strip the wires on the ends of the cable so they would attach into the jacks of the receiver and the jacks of the speakers. And right from the beginning, I love CDs. I know that now there's a lot of people that they like the way vinyl sounds more than CDs. And that's a matter of taste, and that's fine. But sonically and scientifically, it can be shown that CDs best reproduce the original sound. So I love CDs, and at the time when I initially started buying them, they didn't come out at the same time as the albums came out. You generally had to wait several months. But eventually they reached a point where they did get consistent release with the album, the vinyl. I think the first one I got like that it was the same release, was an Iron Maiden album. I think Power Slave, but I'm not positive about that. I've always loved CDs. I'll talk more recent times. Like everybody else, I'm gravitating to streaming services as that's easy. But I'll talk about that much later in these summaries. But getting CDs was a big part of my musical journey, and I did love them. And I still do, even if I don't get many anymore. Now I want to just go through and do a kind of where are they now, if they are still doing anything that I'm aware of, with the major artists I talk about. I talked about so many in this one, I can't talk about everyone, but just kind of the ones that are the important ones to me. Bruce Springsteen continued to release albums, to tour. Although, as the years went by, he didn't get so many hit singles. I think he's one of those artists, relatively rare artists, that was still making really good albums, even if they weren't selling as much as they did before. He is still touring, actually. I think he's currently touring now. He has had some health issues. He's in his 70s now. And if you've ever seen him or even seen videos of him or heard about him, he really gives us all. He has long concerts. And it could just be that maybe age is catching up to him, unfortunately. It does happen. But he's still a vital recording artist, still touring. Prince released a lot more music, toured a lot more. I mentioned the 2 times I saw him, I think, in the 80s, but I saw him, I believe, a couple more times. Unfortunately, I'm not sure exactly the time frame. Time gets away from me. Maybe about a half dozen years ago, unfortunately passed on. I believe there were some issues related to overdoses and drug issues that were involved. It was quite a shock to me. Sadly, you get kind of used to, rock musicians, whatever genre, dying of overdoses or things of that nature. But it was still, with Prince, it was a real shock when he died. He wasn't that old. I think he was in his 50s. Did release a ton of music, though. Duran Duran is another band, surprisingly, still around. They still release music. I've got some of it. What I heard is good, but I have to say, in general, I tend to listen to the early music of any artist. But still around, as a matter of fact. They're touring, too. I don't know if it's a full tour, but I saw that they're going to be playing Madison Square Garden this fall, so they're still around. I did see them a couple times. Not in their prime, unfortunately. I recall they had a concert in 1985 at the Harvard Civic Center, which I went to a lot, but for some reason I didn't get a ticket, and I really don't know why. A little bit regret not seeing them in their prime, but still around, still touring, releasing music. U2 is still around too, and they're like Springsteen in that despite the fact that they're so well into their career, they still release vital music. Unusual, as I said, as a band gets late in their career. You might say they're mid in their career, but they've been around a while. Well, actually, 40 years, so maybe they're kind of late in their career too. But they're still releasing music, and they're still touring. I saw them a few other times. Last time, about 6 years ago. I'll talk more about a lot of these two when I get to the decades, but U2's still around, still releasing vital music. And just the few artists I mentioned that other artists I saw early on MTV. I won't say too much about them, but I know Culture Club toured recently, and their leader, Boy George, is actually on a combo tour. Can't think of the correct term for it, but there's a bunch of artists on it. So he's actually touring this year. Don't really know what Adam Ant's doing. Not too many years ago he toured. I believe the Eurythmics officially ended. I don't think they're going to do anything in the future. I have no idea about Men with Hats or the Buggles. Cyndi Lauper does still tour. I did see her a couple times in more recent years, so she still does tour. She must release new music, but I'm not aware of it. REM retired maybe half a dozen years or so ago. It was a retirement too. It wasn't really a breakup. They just decided they weren't going to tour or release music again. Recently saw some intimation that they might get together for something, but I don't recall what that was. But I saw them several more times too, so I saw REM a fair amount. They became a big arena band and were that for a long time. I mentioned about Prince passing on. I don't know about the members of the Revolution, what they were doing. Wendy and Lisa, the two women in their group, did have some album releases, but that's a while back, and I have no idea what they're doing right now. Michael Jackson died fairly young too. I can't remember if there was some issue with him. Might have been another addiction issue, but I just think that's kind of what you see a lot of with, rock, pop musicians. So I'm not sure, but he did pass on. I never did see him, which I suppose was a shame, but he wasn't in my upper tier, like I said, even though I recognize that he's a great influential artist. The Bangles, after they released their second album, well, it was actually their third or fourth album, but their second popular album, Everything. After they released their second popular album, Everything, they just had a long hiatus, and I'm not sure why. It was maybe 12 years. I had a suspicion that because they were a Democratic band, 4 members, kind of equal. And then the press really started to love Susanna Hoffs, and I'm not sure if that drove a wedge in them or not. They're almost, to me, kind of like a might-have-been band. One of those bands that they're really hot, and then they just stopped, and derailed any momentum they had. There's no way of knowing. But they did get together again, and I did see them a couple times later. And I'll talk about those when I get to those decades. Joan Jett and the Blackhearts have continued to release music, had some more hits, had a lot of tours. I saw them multiple times. And they still tour. As a matter of fact, Joan Jett toured with Alanis Morissette just this year, and I'm not positive, but they may still be on tour because they passed through this area not long ago. A very influential, I don't know, if she's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, she should be. I hope she is. Amy Grant is still releasing music too. She had a period in the late 80s, early 90s. She released some secular albums when they were huge hits, the albums, and she had some hit songs off them. Then she went back to recording Christian music. I don't know if the fact that she recorded secular music, then went back, hurt her career. It's possible. People don't really like that, I think, when you make changes like that. But she still releases music. She, not too long ago, maybe longer than I think, she married popular country singer Vince Gill, and they've been married for a while. They seem to have a really good relationship. And she still tours. Matter of fact, I think she's having some Christmas concerts this holiday season. Heart have had on and off tours over the years. I'm not sure what the status is. I know the two sisters, Ann and Nancy Wilson, have toured individually, although Nancy Wilson's case, there's another pretty famous singer that I'm too familiar with by the name of Nancy Wilson, so I've got confused. But I really don't know about the status of Heart anymore. Whether they're still releasing music or they plan to in the future or not. Of course, a band that starts in the 70s, I guess they certainly deserve to have a retirement if that's their choice. Billy Joel stopped releasing new music a while back. It is possible he released a single or two, but certainly there wasn't a lot of music. But he's had an incredible residency at Madison Square Garden. I don't recall the number, but it's probably over 100. I mean, he's just played a ton of concerts at Madison Square Garden. Occasionally he goes elsewhere, like I've seen him do concerts on, well, I haven't personally seen him there, but he did concerts on Long Island. I think he did one at Fenway Park in Boston. He is going to end his Madison Square Garden residency soon, but he's just far and away the record for concerts done there. I did see him a few more times. Billy Joel did some tours in a co-bill with Elton John, and I saw a couple of those. I believe they called them back-to-back. Those are really cool to see. I'll talk about them a little more later, but in Elton John, he had a long career too, more hit singles. I saw him solo in addition to the Billy Joel concerts, I think maybe once, although I'm not sure. I might not have seen him again. But I did see him at least the time in the 80s and the time 2 times with Billy Joel. He, not too long ago, had a farewell tour. And although you can never tell, the impression I get is it truly was a farewell, that it was the last he would tour, last he would release music. Dan Fogelberg, I don't know what he did musically after his peak. He may have released music. I'm not familiar with it. He died a fair amount back, I guess. I believe it was prostate cancer. He was fairly young, I think in his 50s. The B-52s had a lot more tours, released more music. None of the music ever reached the height of Cosmic Thing, but they toured a lot more. I did see them another time. It was either in the aughts or in the early 2010s. Cyndi Lauper did a tour, True Colors, which was a tour supporting gay rights, and the B-52s were part of that. So I did see them a second time. They also had a farewell tour, and as far as I know, they're not going to tour again or release music. Talked about Queen in my last video, but since I don't know if everyone who watches this video watched that last video, Queen released more music into the 80s. They weren't, at least in the US, they weren't as popular as they had been. But I think in Europe their stayed high. It's general knowledge, I guess, certainly if you care about Queen, you know Freddie Mercury died of AIDS. The band in recent years toured as Queen with Adam Lambert. Adam Lambert finished second on a season of American Idol, although I think most people think he should have finished first. I did not see that tour. I think it would have been a good one. I have no idea what the plans are for Queen in the future, if there are any, or if they're going to tour with Lambert. I have no idea what Adam Lambert's doing either, actually. Bad Company's run as a hit maker, a big album seller, really didn't extend too far into the 80s. I mentioned in my last video about how Paul Rodgers formed a one-album band with Jimmy Page called The Firm, which both the album and the tour are better forgotten. I know Bad Company have got together on occasion. I don't think too many years ago they did a tour, but I did not get to see it. It would have been good, I'm sure, hearing those old songs again. A lot of these people are really up there in age. I have no idea whether Bad Company will ever do anything again, or Rodgers will do anything again. Pat Benatar was another one who, once we got maybe into the late 80s, the hit-making times were over. I'm sure she released more music, more albums. Don't think she had hits again. Did continue to tour. And I did see her one more time. I kind of think it was an opening act, but I can't even recall for sure what the time period was, maybe in the 90s. Her husband, Neil Giraldo, is the songwriter for her and guitarist. So they tour now as Pat Benatar and Neil Giraldo. And they still do tour. I've seen that recently they tour. I think, too, which is a good thing for her and him, they play places that are big enough that it's not one of those stereotypical touring situations where they're driving around in a beat-up old van and it breaks down every 2 weeks. They're going to get good enough money that the touring situation is still probably pretty comfortable. Roger Waters in the 2010s did several tours doing The Wall, and I did see one of them. I'll talk about that when I get to that decade. And he did a later tour when he was playing some Pink Floyd songs beyond What's on the Wall, which is another indication that he and Gilmour have at least settled their differences. I don't know if they'll ever be great friends, but they're not really enemies anymore. He's another one up in age. I don't know what his future plans are. I have a suspicion he'd like to do a Pink Floyd tour, but as I said in my last video, I don't see David Gilmour wanting to do that. New Order continued to release music too and still tours. They toured a year or two ago in the U.S. I didn't get a chance to see them, but they still tour. Most of the original members of the band are there. They had an acrimonious split with their bass player Peter Hook, and that ended in illegal settlements. But the remainder of the band still tours with, I'm sure, supporting musicians. Bjork had a lot of success as a solo artist, and critically acclaimed in sales. I'm not sure when the last time she actually released anything, and I doubt we'd ever see a Sugar Cubes reunion. There would be no reason for Bjork to do that. The only thing I recently saw about Johnny Rotten of Public Image Limited is that his original band, the Sex Pistols, they played a concert, but they played it without him. I don't know what his plans are either. Jethro Tull still releases music, still tours after all this time. Styx also does the same, still releases music, still tours. Not long after the concert tour that I saw, Synchronicity for the Police, the band broke up. Sting went on to have a very successful solo career. Copeland, the drummer, I can't remember his first name offhand, but he had a successful career as a scorer of films. I don't recall what Andy Summers did, the bass player. Stuart Copeland, I should remember, a person who's got the same first name as me. They did a reunion tour in 2007. I did see them. I'll talk about that when I get to that decade. Gordon Lightfoot died not long ago after a long career in music. Robert Plant's still going strong with solo albums, recording and touring with Alison Krauss. There's other projects he does. He does a lot of projects. He gets to do whatever he wants. Joe Walsh is still around, still tours with the Eagles. As I mentioned in my last video, they have a residency in Las Vegas coming up. I did see Lisa of Lisa and Cult Jam. She was part of a package bill not too long ago that came around in this area. Steve Winwood's still around. I don't know what he's doing. Eric Clapton is still around too. He did a tour not long ago. I don't know if he releases new music or not. Tina Turner passed away not too long ago after a long career. Lionel Richie's still around. I think he was a judge on one of the music reality shows. I'm not absolutely positive about that though. David Bowie passed on not too long ago. He released music, continued releasing music. Matter of fact, he released music. His last album came out a little after he passed away, which would have meant he was recording it. He was recording and working on it pretty much until he couldn't do it anymore, until he passed away or close to it.